In an age where information travels faster than ever, the line between truth and manipulation has never been thinner. We like to believe we're too smart to fall for propaganda, too informed to be influenced, too critical to control. But what if propaganda tactics are so deeply embedded in our daily news, conversations, and social media feeds that we don't even recognize them? So, is there a playbook for propaganda? Who wrote it? And more importantly, how do we recognize it before it shapes us? That's what we're exploring today on Mind the Gap. Here's Michael.
Let's play a game. Imagine waking up in a world where the truth is no longer a fixed point, where facts don't matter as much as how often you hear them, where the loudest voice drowns out reason. Imagine a place where reality isn't something you observe, but something that's constructed for you, piece by piece, tweet by tweet, headline by headline. The scariest part, we might already be living in it. But here's the trick. There's never just one truth. The world is complex, and perspectives shape what we see. Yet propaganda isn't about exploring different truths. It's about controlling which truth is the loudest, which truth survives, and which truth gets buried. It's about making sure one version of reality becomes so dominant, so familiar, that everything else outside it feels unnatural, possibly even dangerous. This week, I did a lot of driving, and I decided to change my listening, and I flipped between Fox Radio News and NPR from New York. At first, it was just background noise, but the more I listened, the more I started to notice a pattern. One station in particular seemed to be working off a script or a playbook, not just in the way they framed the news, but in the rhythms of repetition, the emotional cues, the way certain words were chosen and emphasized. It made me wonder, is there a playbook for propaganda? If so, where did it come from? And how is it being used so effectively today? Propaganda is not just a thing of the past. It's not just something used by regimes in history books or governments we like to point fingers at. It's here, it's now, and it's thriving in ways more sophisticated than ever. It's in the news we consume, the debates we engage in, the narratives that shape our views of the world. It's not always obvious. It doesn't arrive with a warning label. Sometimes it comes wrapped in the voice of authority. Sometimes it looks like common sense. Sometimes it plays on our fears, our hopes, and it didn't appear out of nowhere. The tactics we see today have deep roots. Edward Bernays, often called the father of public relations, literally wrote the book on it. His 1928 work, Propaganda, laid out how mass manipulation works, taking cues from his uncle, Sigmund Freud, and applying psychological principles to shape public opinion. Bernays worked with governments and corporations, proving that controlling narratives was as much about psychology as it is about politics. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's minister of propaganda, took these ideas further, refining them into the terrifyingly effective machine that fueled Nazi Germany. His approach? Repetition, emotional appeal, and creating an illusion of consensus. He understood that if a lie was repeated often enough, it would become indistinguishable from the truth. But propaganda wasn't just a tool of fascist regimes. The Soviet Union mastered it, ensuring that a carefully controlled message could unify a population while silencing dissent. During the Cold War, think tanks in the US and UK studied these tactics, refining them for their own ideological battles, weaponizing fear, creating national enemies, and controlling narratives to sway public sentiment. And then, of course, there's modern media. Fox News didn't invent propaganda, but it perfected a model that plays on emotional framing, repetition, and strategic scapegoating. Roger Ailes, the mastermind behind the network, understood that news wasn't just about reporting, it was about shaping perception. Meanwhile, figures like Donald Trump and Elon Musk use these techniques instinctively, whether through relentless messaging, undermining institutions, or creating a sense of us versus them. It's easy to believe that we're too smart to fall for it, that we'd recognize manipulation when we see it. But history and psychology tells us otherwise. Repetition works. Emotional appeal works. Scapegoating works. And in a time when information travels faster than ever, propaganda has become a game of speed, volume, and control. The challenge isn't just spotting it. It's making sure we don't mistake the most repeated version of the truth for the only one that exists. So how do we recognize it? How do we resist it? And more importantly, how do we stop mistaking propaganda for truth? And that's what we're exploring today. Propaganda isn't some relic of the past. It's alive and well, shaping everything from political elections to corporate branding. And here's the thing, it doesn't always look like propaganda. It sneaks in through the news we consume, the opinions we hear repeated over and over, and even the way stories are framed on social media. We tend to think of it as something authoritarian regimes do, but the truth is, democracies have their own versions of it. Just look at the way figures like Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Fox News have mastered the art of controlling narratives, influencing public perception, and creating their own realities. The scary part? It works. And it works because it taps into the way our brains are wired. That's why recognizing it isn't just about avoiding manipulation, it's about keeping our critical thinking skills sharp in an era where disinformation spreads faster than the truth. One of the oldest tricks in the book is repetition. Say something enough times and people start to believe it. Even if they know it's false at first, the more they hear it, the more familiar it feels. And the brain tends to equate familiarity with truth. This is what psychologists call the Illusory Truth Effect. A study published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology found that even when people knew a claim wasn't true, repeated exposure made them more likely to believe it later. And this is why Trump's repeated claims of election fraud stuck with so many people, despite there being no credible evidence. Fox News does the same thing. If you hear about a so-called crime wave in every news segment, you start to feel like the world is more dangerous than it actually is. Musk plays this game too, constantly tweeting about the so-called biases of the mainstream media to push the idea that alternative sources, ones that favour his own views, are much more reliable. So how do we fight this? First, we need to start asking, where's the evidence? Just because a claim is everywhere doesn't mean it's true. And we need to be aware that social media algorithms love repetition. They push content that keeps people engaged, which often means reinforcing whatever biases are already there. Breaking out of that cycle takes effort. It means cross-checking information, looking at sources with different perspectives, and staying aware of how we're being nudged in certain directions without even realizing it. Another powerful tactic is playing on emotions. Facts don't always win people over, but emotions do. Fear, anger, patriotism, these are the buttons propaganda loves to push. And when we're caught up in those emotions, we don't stop to think critically. This is why Voltaire once said, "If you can make people believe absurdities, you can make them commit atrocities." Think about how Musk uses Twitter or X to rally his followers. He doesn't just defend his business decisions. He frames any criticism of him as part of a bigger cultural war. Suddenly, it's not about Tesla's performance or X's declining influence. It's about fighting the woke mob. And just like that, people who might have questioned him before now feel like they need to pick a side. The best way to resist this? Slow down. When you find yourself getting emotionally worked up over something you've read or heard, take a moment. Ask yourself, What reaction is this trying to get from me? Am I being led to feel outrage instead of being encouraged to think critically? Step back, breathe, and seek out other perspectives before you react. Then there's scapegoating. The idea that if we can just blame one group for all our problems, everything will make sense. This is a classic propaganda move. People do it with immigrants, painting them as threats to national identity. Trump did it with the press, calling journalists enemies of the people. It's a way to simplify complex issues and channel frustration onto a target. But real life is rarely that simple. And when someone is telling you that all the problems in the world can be blamed on a single group or individual, you should immediately be suspicious. A related trick is whataboutism. Instead of answering tough questions, propagandists shift the focus elsewhere. Confront Trump about election interference and suddenly it's all about the Hunter Biden laptop. Musk does the same thing. If people call out disinformation on his platform, he deflects them with, what about the mainstream media's lies? It's a game of distraction. And the way to deal with it is simple. Don't get pulled off course. If someone dodges a question, bring it back. If they change the subject, point it out. Another technique that's become even more powerful in the age of social media is the illusion of consensus. When we see a lot of people agreeing on something, it's easy to assume it must be true. But these days, consensus can be manufactured. Bots, troll farms, and coordinated campaigns can make it seem like a particular view is already widely accepted, when in reality, it's just being amplified artificially. Musk, for instance, loves to use X or Twitter polls to prove public sentiment, even though they're completely unscientific. If you're basing your opinions on what seems popular, you just might be falling for an illusion. And then there's one of the most dangerous propaganda tactics of all: undermining trust in institutions. The goal here isn't just to push a particular message, it's to make you doubt everything. If you believe all news is fake, all elections are rigged, and all experts are biased, then suddenly nothing is reliable. And when nothing is reliable, people become easier to manipulate. Trump did this masterfully by attacking the press at every turn. Musk does it constantly, bashing mainstream media. The result? People stop trusting well-researched journalism and turn to alternative sources that often have no accountability whatsoever. It's also important not to confuse stupidity with strategy, or strategy with stupidity, when it comes to those who use propaganda. A lot of people assume that when Trump or Musk say something outrageous, it must be a mistake or a moment of recklessness. That's often not the case. What looks like an impulsive rant is frequently a calculated move. Propagandists know how to dominate the conversation, distract from real issues, and keep their audience engaged. At the same time, just because someone is loud and provocative doesn't mean they're a master strategist either. Sometimes it really is just chaos and incompetence. The trick is learning to recognize when something is deliberate manipulation and when it's just noise. The antidote: trust, but verify. There's a difference between healthy skepticism and blind cynicism. Good journalism has a track record for accuracy, uses credible sources, and corrects its mistakes. Propaganda, on the other hand, doesn't care about being right. It cares about winning. So how do we resist propaganda in everyday life? First, strengthen your critical thinking and media literacy. Ask questions. Look at who benefits from a particular narrative. Understand how framing and emotional manipulation work. Second, break the emotional cycle. If something makes you angry or scared, pause and ask why. Third, diversify your information sources. If you're only hearing one side of an argument, you're not seeing the full picture. Fourth, practice intellectual humility. Be willing to change your mind when presented with solid evidence. And finally, challenge manipulative narratives without escalating conflict. Ask questions like, "What's the evidence for that?" is often more effective than outright confrontation. The bottom line, propaganda is powerful, but it's not unbeatable. The more we understand how it works, the harder it becomes to manipulate us. And in an age of disinformation, staying informed is an act of resistance. Or as Daniel Boorstin put it, the greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it's the illusion of knowledge. Mind the gap.
Propaganda isn't just something that happens in the past or in distant regimes. It's alive, evolving, and shaping the way we think right now. But the more we understand it, the less power it has over us. Recognizing the tactics, questioning the narratives, and staying open to complexity is how we push back against manipulation. If today's episode got you thinking, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next conversation. Thanks for listening to Mind the Gap. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and keep questioning.